Have you ever met someone who changed everything without staying? They didn't come into your life to build a future, to settle down, or to complete the fairy tale ending. They came to awaken something sleeping deep inside you, something ancient, tender, and painfully true. At first, their presence felt like a flame, warm, intoxicating, almost divine. But it wasn't comfort they brought, it was remembrance. They stirred emotions you didn't know were still alive, long-buried wounds, childhood echoes, dreams you once abandoned. They reminded you of what it means to feel everything all at once. The longing, the ache, the beauty, the raw truth you've tried so hard to keep quiet. And then just as suddenly they left. No closure, no clear reason. But one thing was certain, you were no longer the same. Because they weren't just a lover, a friend, or a fleeting chapter. They were a spiritual catalyst. They came to awaken your soul, not your romantic storyline. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And this is exactly that, a love not built for holding, but for shaking you awake. It wasn't about forever. It was about remembering who you are beneath the stories you've lived. So let me ask you this. Who was the one that cracked your heart wide open, just so you could meet yourself? Some people don't just enter your life, they break into it. Like a cosmic lightning bolt, they arrive when you least expect it. And everything you thought was stable begins to unravel. But this unraveling is not destruction. It's an invitation. An invitation to see yourself clearly, deeply, painfully for the first time. They don't come to love you in the way you imagined. They come to mirror you, to reflect the parts of you you've hidden, avoided, or buried beneath layers of survival and self-protection. Maybe you thought you were done grieving that childhood wound. Maybe you thought you were over that betrayal. But then they show up, and suddenly old pain speaks again. Not to torment you, but to ask, are you finally ready to heal? Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And these people, these powerful soul connections, are the catalysts of that realization. They don't just show you your dreams, they resurrect the ones you gave up on. They don't just stir your heart, they awaken your soul's unfinished stories. Sometimes the person you think was sent to love you was actually sent to shake you awake. And that's not a failure, that's spiritual design. Because growth rarely feels like love at first. It feels like rupture, it feels like discomfort, it feels like a mirror held up with no filter, no makeup, no mask, just the raw truth staring back. So here's the deeper question. What if the person who hurt you the most was the one who helped you see yourself the clearest? You know that feeling. When you meet someone and it's not, "Hi, nice to meet you," it's more like, "There you are, I've known you before." That kind of connection isn't casual, it's not something you swipe into or stumble across at the right party. It's something ancient, sacred, almost chemical, but not the kind you studied in science class. This is soul chemistry. It's the kind of magnetic pull that doesn't make logical sense, yet feels more real than anything you've ever known. Because it's not new, it's not a beginning, it's a recognition. Carl Jung once hinted that what draws us to someone isn't just attraction, it's the unconscious calling home to something familiar. And these deep connections, they're not accidents. They're echoes from past lives, from unfinished stories still woven into your energy. When this type of connection happens, it doesn't just touch your heart, it rewrites something deeper. It stirs your emotional DNA. It wakes up the parts of your soul that have been asleep for years, maybe even lifetimes. You feel more you around them, but also more exposed, like they can see straight through your defenses, say past your practiced smile, into the places you haven't even visited yourself. And here's the thing, they didn't show up to build a forever with you. They showed up to burn away everything that isn't really you. This is not the sweet comfort of a slow romance. This is spiritual alchemy. the fire that transforms, the mirror that doesn't flatter but reveals. You might mistake this for love, and in some ways it is. But it's not the kind of love that soothes you to sleep. It's the kind that wakes you up in the middle of the night and asks, are you ready to become who you truly are? So if you're wondering why this connection hits so deep, why you still feel their energy even after they're gone, it's because it was never just about romance. It was about remembrance. It was about evolution. They were never here to complete you. They were here to ignite you. Have you ever asked yourself, why would the universe show me something so beautiful only to take it away? That question alone has kept countless hearts awake at night. It's a wound that feels personal, unjust, as if the universe teased you with a glimpse of heaven just to watch you fall. But what if it wasn't a punishment at all? What if it was a sacred invitation? You see, when a deep soul connection enters our life, unexpected, intense, electric, it feels like destiny. And it is, but not in the way we often romanticize. Carl Jung called it synchronicity, a meaningful coincidence that cracks through the illusion of randomness. In spiritual terms, synchronicity isn't just a coincidence. It's a conversation, a whisper from the divine. And sometimes that whisper doesn't arrive gently. Sometimes it strikes like lightning, flashing truth into the shadowed corners of your soul. The person you met wasn't just a lover, a muse, or a stranger. They were a mirror, a key. They arrived not to stay, but to open something inside of you, to unlock doors you've kept sealed maybe for lifetimes. Think back. Before they came, you might have thought you had healed. You might have believed you were done grieving the past, but their presence shook you, stirred something ancient, memories, dreams, wounds you didn't have names for. And when they left, or faded, or turned away, your first instinct may have been to scream, why would the universe be so cruel? But perhaps the deeper truth is this: the universe was never being cruel. It was summoning your soul to awaken, because what they ignited in you wasn't loss. It was a confrontation with parts of you that needed your attention, your loneliness, your longing, your unspoken grief. Their exit wasn't betrayal, it was alignment, it was timing, it was the end of a contract fulfilled. This is where most of us get stuck. We confuse presence with permanence. We assume if something feels right, it should last forever. But in the world of the soul, duration isn't the measure of impact. A lightning bolt lasts only a second, but it can light up an entire sky and split open a tree that stood silent for 100 years. So what if this person came to do exactly that? To split open your silence, to shatter the surface, so you could dive deeper into your own inner ocean. Synchronicity isn't about making sense. It's about awakening senses. It's about patterns that speak not to your logic, but to your soul. So the next time you feel that pain, the echo of someone who stirred you deeply, but didn't stay, ask this instead: what were they here to awaken? Because often these soul encounters aren't about finding the one. They're about finding the truth inside you, the part of you that still aches, the story that still controls you, the shadow you've been too afraid to face. They were a flashlight in your emotional basement, not to decorate it, but to show you what needs clearing. Cleaning, healing. This doesn't make the pain go away, but it gives it meaning. And when pain has meaning, it becomes a portal, not a prison. So no, you weren't punished. You were prepared. You were aligned. You were chosen to remember the deepest truth, that the universe is always working with you, not against you. But first, it must reveal what's been buried. And sometimes it sends someone just long enough to help you dig. That's not cruelty, that's cosmic precision. That's grace wearing a disguise. And maybe now, in the quiet of this moment, you can feel it. The invitation was never about holding on. It was about holding yourself through the fire and letting the ashes tell a new story. Let's get honest about something we rarely talk about. Sometimes the people who break us the most are not the ones who betrayed us, not the ones who hated us, but the ones who saw us too clearly, too quickly, too deeply. And it shook something inside of us we didn't know was so fragile. You see, they weren't a reward from the universe. They were a mirror, but not the kind of mirror that flatters, not the one that filters, softens, or lies. No, they were the mirror that shows you everything, even the parts you've tried to hide. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." These people, they come into our lives to reflect what we've buried, the abandonment we never healed, the fear of not being enough, the ache of always being the one left behind. And maybe you felt it, that intense connection, that emotional gravity that made you feel like your heart wasn't just opening, it was unraveling. But here's what we often miss. They weren't trying to destroy you, they were revealing you. They weren't hurting you, though it felt that way. They were highlighting the places where you were already hurting. Like emotional archaeologists, they brushed away your surface just enough for the bones beneath to be exposed. And when they walked away, when things fell apart, something inside of you cracked. But maybe that crack was necessary, because that's where the light gets in. Let me ask you this. Before they came, were you truly listening to your inner wounds? Were you tending to the fears that haunted your relationships? Or were you simply surviving, performing, pretending? It's a hard question, I know, but necessary. Because the truth is, breakdown is often the beginning of breakthrough. And pain, real soul-level pain, it's not a death sentence. It's an invitation. You didn't shatter because you were weak. You shattered because your heart was finally soft enough, open enough, brave enough to feel. And in that feeling, something old dissolved, maybe a story, maybe a self-image, maybe a survival mask. This is the mirror effect. They didn't ruin you. They reflected you. They held up a truth so bright, so raw, so personal. You could no longer pretend. Yes, it hurt, it burned, but it also revealed. And what if that's the point? What if you weren't meant to come out of that relationship the same? What if the goal was never to keep them, but to reclaim yourself through them? You see, many of us mistake love for permanence. We think if it ends, it failed. But some of the most important loves don't stay, they awaken. They awaken the child in you who still fears rejection. They awaken the voice in you that says, "I'll never be enough." They awaken the longing to finally come home to yourself. And then they leave. Not to punish you, but because their role is complete. They were a sacred catalyst, not a destination. And you, yes, you were not broken by their departure. You were reborn by your awakening. This isn't just a story of heartbreak. It's a story of transformation. Because what if the heartbreak wasn't about losing them, but about meeting yourself in the ruins? What if the ache you feel isn't emptiness, but spaciousness, space for truth, space for healing, space for a version of you that no longer chases love to feel whole? So next time you look back and think, "They shattered me," remember this: no one can break what isn't already brittle. And if they cracked something in you, maybe that was life's way of saying, it's time to rebuild from truth, not fear. Have you ever met someone who didn't just enter your life? They entered your becoming. It's why you still think about them. Not because of who they were, but because of who you became in their presence. They didn't just make you feel, they made you remember. Remember the version of you that once dreamed, once felt deeply, before life taught you to numb, to shrink, to survive instead of live. They didn't come to stay. They came to stir, to shake, to awaken. Sometimes the people who leave the deepest mark are not the ones who walk with us for years. They're the ones who strike like lightning, split us open in a single season, and vanish, leaving us with the burning question: What now? Carl Jung believed that what is unconscious in us will continue to run our lives until we make it conscious. And that's exactly what these soul-shaking encounters do. They bring what was hidden to the surface. You didn't forget them because they weren't just a relationship. They were a mirror that reflected the parts of you that had been asleep. That version of you that you buried long ago, the wild one, the creative one, the soft one who wanted to be held, the bold one who longed to be seen. They showed you what was possible, not just in love, but within yourself. And when they left, it wasn't just a breakup, it was a breakthrough. But here's the thing most people don't tell you. They weren't meant to walk the rest of the road with you. They were the earthquake that shook you off your old path. The one built on fear, on smallness, on trying to please or prove or survive. Their presence cracked the foundations. Their absence forced you to rebuild. And now, you stand at a threshold. Do you wait for them to return, or do you return to yourself? See, the real question isn't, why did they leave? It's, what did they awaken in me that I can no longer ignore? Maybe they awakened your need for truth, or the ache to live with more soul, or the courage to finally stop abandoning yourself. Whatever it is, they didn't give you anything. They reminded you that you were always meant to be more, to feel more, to rise. It's easy to idealize these connections, to place them on pedestals and write poetry about what could have been. But the most important thing you can do now is bring that energy home. Use it, channel it, transform it, not into more longing, but into becoming, because they didn't come to complete you. They came to ignite you. Now the flame is yours to carry. So pause, take a breath, and ask yourself, who am I becoming because of this? What have I been awakened to that I can't go back to sleep on? What is my soul asking me to do now? Maybe it's time to start writing that book, or speaking that truth, or ending the patterns that have kept you small. Their role wasn't to walk the path with you. Their role was to turn you toward it. And here's the most powerful part of all. Even though they're gone, their impact remains, not as a wound, but as a compass. And every time you choose to follow that inner truth, to love yourself more honestly, to rise into your next version, you honor what they awakened. So no, they weren't just a memory, they were a message. And now it's your turn to answer the call. Let me ask you something, gently but directly. Have you ever been surrounded by people and still felt deeply alone? Not because no one was there, but because no one really saw you. You laughed, you nodded, you played your part well. But inside, you were wearing armor, a carefully crafted version of yourself. Polished, polite, but hollow. You survived by performing, until one day someone walked in and looked straight through the act. Not with judgment, but with recognition. They didn't see the mask. They saw the part of you you had forgotten. The one buried under years of being strong, of holding it together, of pretending it doesn't hurt. And suddenly, something cracked. Not your heart, but your numbness. You see, Carl Jung once said, loneliness does not come from being alone. It comes from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. And maybe for the first time in years, you felt like someone could understand the language of your soul without you having to translate. That's what these rare encounters do. They don't just touch your life. They interrupt your survival patterns. They pierce the silence inside you, the silence where dreams once whispered, where pain was carefully tucked away. They don't fix you. They remind you that you were never broken. Because let's be honest, you've been functioning. You've been managing. You've been performing what looks like a successful, capable life. But deep down there was a quiet ache, a kind of emotional sleepwalking. And then they happened. Not like a savior, but like a spiritual earthquake. They didn't ask for your mask. They asked for your truth. And that alone was terrifying, but also freeing. It wasn't love in the traditional sense. It was something deeper. It was an activation. You started to feel things again. Yes, the joy, but also the grief, the longing, the rage, all the things your nervous system once muted just to keep you safe. And for a moment, it felt overwhelming, because when you've lived in survival mode, feeling anything can seem dangerous. But this is where the shift begins. This is where you move from mere existence into aliveness. They didn't just see the version of you that the world applauded. They saw the hidden self, the soul underneath the strategy, the child underneath the coping. And maybe that scared you, because being seen can feel like exposure. But it was also the most honest thing you'd felt in a long time. They weren't a chapter in your love life. They were a mirror in your spiritual journey. And through that mirror, you remembered you weren't born just to perform. You were born to feel, to connect, to awaken. That's why their presence hit differently. That's why their absence echoes still. It wasn't because you're weak. It's because your soul was stirred. So now, what will you do with this awakening? Will you go back to the numbness, the pretending, the polite survival? Or will you honor what's been activated in you, because the real invitation here isn't to chase them. It's to become who you were always meant to be. The one who doesn't just survive, but lives wide open. The one who tells the truth even when it shakes. Who chooses depth even when it's messy. Who knows that feeling deeply is not a flaw, it's a superpower. So if you're in that space right now, somewhere between heartbreak and breakthrough, know this: you are not going backwards, you're going deeper. And every tear, every tremble, every breath you take, without the mask, is a victory. You're not returning to who you were before them. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. Not the performer, not the survivor, but the soul, awakened. Let's be honest. Breakups, endings, departures, they're brutal. But what if I told you this wasn't just a breakup? What if this pain you're feeling, this ache that feels like it split your chest open, was actually something far deeper? A rite of passage. In spiritual traditions around the world, there is a sacred moment called initiation. It marks the end of one version of you and the painful birth of another. Carl Jung had a word for this. He called it individuation, the lifelong process of separating your true self from the identity the world gave you. And do you know what cracks that false identity most powerfully lost? Especially the kind that comes wrapped in love. Especially the kind that leaves no goodbye, just silence and a mirror. When someone enters your life and reflects your soul so vividly only to leave, it doesn't just sting, it shatters you. But hear me, that shattering isn't punishment. It's precision. It's not chaos. It's cleansing. Like a sacred knife, it cuts through the illusion that love has to stay to be real. That you're only worthy when you're chosen, that you are what someone else decides to keep. This pain, it's not here to destroy you, it's here to deliver you from roles, masks, and patterns you've outgrown. Deliver you from small stories where you constantly abandon yourself just to be loved. Deliver you from the version of you that begged, settled, or performed. You're not being punished. You're being initiated, and initiations are never gentle. They are holy fires. They strip, burn, and dissolve, not because you're weak, but because your soul is strong enough to rise from the ashes. It had to hurt that much, because that's how tight the armor was. It had to sting, because that's how deep the false self had rooted. And it had to break you open, because nothing less would have awakened the part of you that was asleep. So when you think I was betrayed, reframe it. You were summoned into your next evolution. Summoned to rise from longing to wholeness, from attachment to alignment, from surviving love to becoming it. Because this was not the end of a love story. This was the start of your spiritual autobiography. The real journey isn't about getting them back. It's about getting you back. The version of you that doesn't chase but listens. The one that doesn't cling but surrenders. the one that doesn't shrink but expands through pain. There's a sacred paradox here. You only lose when you refuse to let go. But the moment you release, you gain something you never knew you were missing: yourself. And yes, it hurts. The tears, the questions, the nights where your chest feels hollow. But what's really dying is not your worth. It's your illusion. It's not your capacity to love. It's your addiction to being loved a certain way. It's not your soul. It's the outdated scripts that said you had to earn love by being less of who you are. Let that old self mourn. Let the grief wash over you like sacred rain. But don't confuse the storm with a curse. It's the baptism of becoming. You're not who you were before they came. And that's a good thing, because who you're becoming now is real. So if you're walking through this pain, if it feels like your heart has been torn open, don't rush to close it. Sit in it, breathe in it, let it teach you. Because the ones who come to crack you open are rarely meant to stay. They are messengers, midwives of your awakening. And when they leave, they don't take your wholeness with them. They leave behind something even more powerful, a soul that remembers who it truly is. Let me ask you something deeply personal. Are you still carrying their love? Or just the fantasy of it? It's a hard question, I know. But so many of us, after a soul-shaking connection ends, don't actually carry the truth of what we experienced. We carry the illusion. We replay the laughter, the warmth, the what-ifs. But underneath that highlight reel, what we're really holding on to is the idea that we can't be whole without them. But healing, real soul deep healing, doesn't mean clinging to a memory. It means integration. Carl Jung said that wholeness is not about perfection, but about embracing all parts of your inner world. The shadow and the light, the past and the present, the ache and the awakening. And in the aftermath of that profound connection, integration is not about waiting for them to return. It's about becoming what they awakened in you. They might have sparked the flame, but that flame, it's yours now. The truth is, we were never meant to keep them. We were meant to keep the mirror they held up, the fire they lit in our soul, the version of ourselves we started to remember when they came into our lives. That's what you carry forward. Not the illusion of forever, but the gift of clarity. The clarity that says, I can be the home I once searched for in someone else. You see, most people, without realizing it, carry the ache like a badge. They walk through life waiting, hoping, rehearsing the perfect reunion. But here's the real work. To let go of the fantasy and step fully into the fire of your own becoming. To stop asking, will they come back, and start asking, what did they awaken in me that I'm now ready to live out? That's what integration looks like. It's not glamorous, it's not loud, it's subtle, sacred, and deeply personal. It looks like rebuilding your mornings without their texts. It looks like choosing peace over nostalgia. It looks like becoming the person you glimpsed in their eyes, but now, without needing their eyes to see it. And when you truly integrate, you no longer need closure, because you are the closure. You are the continuation, the living proof that pain can transform, that love doesn't have to stay to be real, that some people are meant to awaken us, not accompany us. And that's okay. Think of them as a match. They struck the fire, but you are the one who chose to keep it burning. The fantasy said I need them to feel complete. The flame says they showed me the door, but I walked through it alone. And maybe that's what soul growth is, not chasing what left, but honoring what remains within you because of it. You don't have to keep chasing the memory. You can become the embodiment of the lesson. You can become the keeper of the flame. Because when you integrate, you stop asking the past to return, and instead, you return to yourself. And that self, that integrated, steady, illuminated self, doesn't just survive heartbreak, they alchemize it. They use the pain as fuel. They turn longing into presence. They turn silence into sacred space. They become the teacher they once sought. So today I invite you to pause and ask, what if I stopped clinging to the illusion and started honoring the ignition? What if I stopped waiting for someone to return and started showing up for myself with the same intensity? You don't need them to come back to validate your worth. You are the lesson. You are the flame. You are the home, and no one can take that from you. What if I told you it wasn't a mistake, that the one who walked in, shook your soul, and then walked out was not some cosmic error or cruel joke, but part of a design, a divine design? You see, we often think life should follow a script. Meet someone, fall in love, stay forever. But some people aren't here to stay. They're here to shake something loose. They come to break the illusion, not to complete the dream you had in your mind, but to dismantle it so you can wake up to something far more real. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens." That person didn't fail you. They fulfilled their purpose. They were the cosmic scalpel sent not to harm, but to reveal, to peel away everything that wasn't you. And I know it hurts when it ends. It feels like something was stolen, but what if you weren't being robbed? What if you were being returned? Returned to your truth, to your wholeness, to the love you stopped giving yourself somewhere along the way. You didn't lose them. You remembered you. Let that sink in, because sometimes the most painful connections are actually the most sacred. They are not punishments, they are initiations. This is not the end of your story. This is your soul's baptism, a spiritual cleansing by fire and tears, a rite of passage, a threshold you couldn't cross alone, so the universe sent someone to hold up a mirror and remind you of everything you forgot inside yourself. Yes, it came with longing. Yes, it came with loss, but also with awakening. They didn't come to fulfill the fantasy. They came to destroy it so you could build something true. So many of us are walking around searching for love in other people's eyes, hoping someone will come and finally make us feel whole. But the deepest love, the one your soul is starving for, is not someone else's arms. It's your own. And sometimes it takes losing the dream to realize how disconnected we've been from ourselves. So ask yourself, what part of me did they wake up? What part of me was I blind to until they came along? Maybe you thought they were the destination. But what if they were just the turning point, the signpost that said, go this way, back home, back to your heart? Don't curse the timing. Don't resent the leaving. They weren't meant to be your forever. They were meant to be your threshold, a spiritual catalyst, a message wrapped in skin, a lesson disguised as love. And now it's your turn to stop asking, why did they leave me? And start asking, what part of me did they liberate that I've been too afraid to claim? Because that's what this was, not a loss, a liberation. You were never abandoned. You were redirected. You were never rejected. You were initiated. The universe does not waste people. It sends exactly who you need at exactly the moment your soul is ready to evolve, even if your mind isn't, even if your heart resists. But evolution doesn't ask for permission. It only waits for readiness, and sometimes it disguises that readiness as heartbreak. So if you're hurting right now, if you're replaying memories, wondering what you did wrong, let me say this with love: you did nothing wrong. They weren't your punishment. They were your portal. You walked through the fire and you didn't come out empty. You came out clean. This is not a story about love lost. It's a story about self-reclaimed. And you are not broken. You are reborn. So honor the experience. Feel the ache. Grieve the loss, but don't forget to bless the lesson. Because now you know. The love you were searching for, the love that burned so brightly in their presence, it was never really theirs. It was yours all along. They just helped you remember. If you still think of them, If your heart trembles a little every time you hear words that sound too much like your story, then hear me out. This isn't the end of love. It's the beginning of a return. Not a return to them, but a return to yourself. You see, they didn't come into your life to stay. They came to ignite something, to awaken what was buried, numbed, or forgotten inside you. They were the spark, but the fire, that's yours now. So many of us wait for closure. We tell ourselves, once I understand what happened, once they explain, once I get the goodbye I deserve, then I'll be free. But here's the truth. You are the closure. You are the one who gets to say, this was not the end of me. This was the beginning of the most sacred version of me. Carl Jung said, we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's what this journey has been, an alchemy of pain into clarity, of longing into liberation. You were not broken, you were being rebuilt. Every heartbreak was a chisel sculpting the soul you are now remembering. So if you're still remembering them, if their name still echoes in your mind, don't shame yourself for that. It means the fire is still burning, but this time it's not about them. It's about what they awakened in you. This love story was never really about another person. It was a mirror. A spiritual mirror so vivid it reflected your most hidden truths. And once you saw them, you could never go back. They didn't leave you empty. They left you lit. That ache in your chest, it's the sound of your soul stretching, making room for all the parts of you that are finally ready to return home. So stop chasing their closure. Stop begging the past to heal you. Instead, take a breath and ask, what if the closure I've been waiting for is actually myself, fully choosing me for the first time ever? Because that's what this is. Not a sad ending, a sacred becoming. You didn't lose them. You found you. And even if you never hear their voice again, even if they never say sorry or explain or circle back what they gave you, was the spark that brought you here, to this version of you. This braver, more aware, more beautifully scarred version who no longer seeks love in someone else's arms, but starts to find it in their own silence, in their own strength, in their own soul. So here's the final message. You are not shattered. You are being rebuilt. This is not about losing them. It's about finally reclaiming you. They were a page, but you are the whole book, and it's time to start writing from the part of you that no longer begs to be chosen, but finally chooses yourself.